Hi. Chapter 9. It's 7:20 and my battery's almost dead, so this might be the last chapter I read tonight. Okay. Night came slowly. I looked up through the hole in the roof and saw night shadows and the first faint star. Black Moccasin sent for me. His wives had built a fire of willow branches and he sat beside it in his heavy bear cape. Find a place where you can see and not be seen, he said to Blue Sky. Sacagawea should not be here at all, but better here than somewhere else. Stand her on the other side of the fire where you can keep an eye on her. If the game goes bad, if she is tempted to flee, be ready to stop her. Against all the laws, Minatory laws, and Shoshone laws, I spoke up. You said that your son Red Hawk never loses in the game of hands. So I did, and now I say it again. Red Hawk never loses in the game of hands. He gave me a sharp look and said to his wife, "Take her away. Guests clamor at the gate." The beat of drums and loud voices came from outside. A gust of wind swept the lodge of Toussaint Charbonneau, burst in, followed by Leborgne and his followers. Black Moccasin pointed to the blanket spread in front of him and bade the men to take their places. Leborgne and his followers, whose cheeks were painted with dots and swirls, sat at one end of the blanket. Charbonneau sat at the other end. I could not see his face because of the hair that covered it and hung down over his chest like a black curtain. Red Hawk came. He smiled to himself and sat in the middle. Red Hawk looks happy, I said. He talks to the Great Spirit, his mother explained. Is the Great Spirit listening? I asked. He always listens to Red Hawk. The other wives began to sing, and all 12 children joined in with deerbone rattles. At the same time, loud chanting came from the warriors gathered outside. In the awful din, Black Moccasin tried to explain the rules. They were the same as those in the place I was born, only here plum seeds were used instead of bones. One of the seeds was rubbed smooth, and the other had a small dent in it, colored yellow and blue. The game was simple. Each player tried to hide the dented pit. He could stand and move his hands and body any way he chose, but not his feet. When he was done with his movements and put his tight fist on the blanket, one of those playing against him must choose the hand that held the colored plum pit. The score was kept by the chieftain, and the winner was the one who guessed right 4 times. The mystical number of all the tribes. Charbonneau passed a jug of rum. Leborgne drank, but Red Hawk refused. He got to his knees, took the 2 plum pits from his father, and tossed them into the air. He caught them in one hand, clasped his hands together, and made the pits rattle. Then he put his fists on the blanket in front of Charbonneau. The Frenchman reached out 2 long thumbs and pressed hard on each of the fists. He was trying to find the hidden seed. You have played this game before? Red Hawk asked him. Often, Charbonneau said. More often than Red Hawk, among many peoples. If you know so much, Charbonneau, do not press so hard or you will crush the seeds. Charbonneau said nothing and took his thumbs away. His narrow head thrust out. He peered at the clenched hands. Here, he said, pointing. Red Hawk turned his fist over. Taking his time, he showed an empty palm. Zoot! The Frenchman shouted. He took a drink from the jug and wiped his mouth on the kerchief around his neck. The other hand, let me see her. Ah! Red Hawk opened his fist, and Charbonneau saw that it held 2 plum seeds. He rubbed his eyes, grabbed the seeds, and jumped to his feet. He raised his hands over his head, yelled like a coyote, "Oh!" and quacked like a duck. Then he shoved his hands close to Leborgne's beaked nose. The great chieftain of the Hidatsa Minatories closed the eyes he could see from. He kept the other eye open and chose the hand that held the colored plum seed. A warrior was sitting on the roof, watching through the smoke hole. He shouted down to the warriors at the gate that their great chieftain had won. The chanting grew louder, but Leborn only smirked. From the moment he strode into the lodge, he had shown that it hurt his pride to play a game, to win a girl, a slave girl, who by all rights belonged to him already. I must have gasped as he twisted his mouth, for Blue Sky said quickly, "The Great Spirit does not like the man. He can never win the game." "What if he does, though?" "I will go with you and take you home to the Shoshone," she said, "and he will never find you." Leborn picked up the plum seeds carefully, one at a time, as if they were hot stones. He did not bother to shake them. He did not open his hands up near his eye, and for a long time looked at them. "Choose," he said to Red Hawk. "And do not move the feet like the Frenchman who acts like a buffalo with 10 arrows stuck in him. It is against the rules to move the feet." Red Hawk guessed at once and chose the right hand, the one that held the colored seed. At this, the singing of the wives grew louder, and the children rattled their deer bones and danced around. Red Hawk looked to make sure that I had seen. I gave a sign and smiled. He did not smile back at me. His mother said, "He thinks well of you, but now his mind is full of the game. He cannot smile until the game is over." The wind, chasing its windy tail, roared around the lodge. Some of it roared down the smoke hole, so Black Moccasin sent one of his wives up on the roof to cover it with a blanket. Charbonneau won the next game and the next. Leborn won the following game. Black Moccasin kept the score, which stood 2 for Charbonneau, 2 for Leborn, and only 1 for Red Hawk. It was the Frenchman's turn now. As before, he went through all of his antics. He also added new ones. He sat on his hands and howled like a wolf and bellowed like a buffalo. Red Hawk groaned while all this was going on. Ugh. When it was over and Charbonneau held out his hands for him to choose, he said, "Nothing is left of the plum seeds. You've worn them out, Frenchman." Surely the words were a joke, but Charbonneau did not take them that way. He glared at Red Hawk and fingered the knife in his belt. For a moment, I thought he meant to use it, but instead he shouted, "Choose! No more talk. Talk gives Charbonneau bugs in the ear." "He has a big temper, this Frenchman," Big Blue Sky said. "Sometime it will give him more than bugs. It will give him big trouble." Red Hawk waited, seeking the colored seed, talking to himself. My heart beat in my throat. Blue Sky must have heard it, for she put an arm around me. "He talks to the Great Spirit. He will choose wisely," she said. But Red Hawk did not choose wisely. Then the game went fast. Leborn took the plum pits and lost to Toussaint Charbonneau. It was Red Hawk's turn again, and Charbonneau needed only one good guess to win. Raising his hands, Red Hawk drew them far apart, but as he brought them together, one of the seeds slipped away and fell on the blanket. "It's a bad omen," I thought to myself, and Blue Sky thought so too. Her arm grew tight around me. "Your hands fly like the goose," Charbonneau said, passing his jug to Red Hawk. "Here, drink. Drink, friend, huh?" Red Hawk had not touched the jug before when it was offered to him, but now he did. He drank a second time and passed the jug back to the Frenchman, who put it down without drinking. "Oh no, this is foolish," Blue Sky said. "I do not like it." The blanket had blown off the smoke hole, and the cold, hissing gusts of air swooped down. The wives brought armfuls of buffalo chips and heaped them on the fire. They smoked so much that it was hard to see what Red Hawk was doing. He was on his feet. He was swaying from side to side, holding the plum seeds above his head. Then he twisted them around the way the Frenchman had done, around his knees and between them. Blue Sky gasped. She took her hand from my shoulder and held it over her mouth. The singing had stopped. There were no sounds from outside except from the man who was at the smoke hole again, shouting down to those who stood at the gate. In the midst of everything great, Chief Leborn rose with a bow to Black Moccasin and silently left the lodge. He slammed the door behind him. For a while shouts echoed, and rocks were hurled against the door and fell upon the roof. Charbonneau stared at me, shielding his eyes against the glare of the fire. It was hard to tell with all the hair he wore on his face, but I thought he saw his lips move in a smile. I did not smile back. It was very quiet as Red Hawk drew himself together, closed his hands, and put them on the blankets in front of Charbonneau. The Frenchman gave them a sidelong glance. He shielded his eyes again and looked at me to make sure I was watching. With a flourish, he put his thumb on the right hand. When it did not open, he pried it open with his big paws. In Red Hawk's hand, he found the colored seed. Charbonneau heaved to his feet and stretched himself. His hairy face loomed through the smoke. Blue Sky took my arm. I will be slow to give you up, she said, leading me away. What do you guys think happened? Charbonneau won, didn't he? That was chapter 9. I'll see you next for chapter 10.